My stepmother demanded that I pay rent to live in my own house while her children lived there for free. Before I explain how that happened, tell me something real quick. Where are you watching from right now? Your phone, your TV, or headphones you're not supposed to have on? Because when she said those words, I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about control. And she thought she already had it. We were sitting at the dining table when she brought it up. Nothing dramatic. No raised voice. Just that careful tone she used whenever she wanted to sound reasonable. The kind that made other people doubt themselves before they even responded. I think it's time we talk about household contributions, Evelyn said, folding her napkin neatly beside her plate. Her smile was small, polished, practiced. The food in front of me had already gone cold, but no one seemed to notice. Everyone was looking at me. I waited, because I knew there was more coming. You're an adult now, Claire, she continued. It's important to learn responsibility early. That word, responsibility, hung in the air longer than it should have. I glanced at my father, Thomas, hoping for a signal. Anything. He stared at his plate, suddenly very interested in his vegetables. That silence told me more than any sentence could have. And what exactly does that mean? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Evelyn tilted her head, as if I were the one being difficult. It means starting next month, you'll be paying rent. The word landed softly. Too softly. Like she expected me to nod and accept it. Across the table, Lucas froze mid-bite. Mia's fork hovered in the air. Neither of them looked surprised. That should have been my first warning. I took a breath. Just to be clear, I said slowly, you want me to pay rent here? Yes, Evelyn replied easily. That's how adulthood works. I nodded once. Then I asked the question that made the room shift. And Lucas and Mia? Evelyn didn't even hesitate. They don't need to worry about that right now. They're still finding their way. Lucas relaxed instantly, leaning back in his chair. Mia smiled, small and relieved, as if she'd just been excused from a test she hadn't studied for. Neither of them said thank you. They didn't need to. They'd never been expected to earn anything in this house. So that was the rule. Only one of us needed to learn responsibility. I didn't argue. Not then. I just nodded again, as if I were taking the information in. Inside, something tightened, not anger, not sadness. Awareness. The kind that doesn't go away once it settles. Evelyn watched me closely, clearly waiting for resistance. When it didn't come, her smile widened just a fraction. I'll put the details together, she said. We'll make it official. Clear expectations help families stay healthy. Family. The word felt misplaced, like furniture shoved into the wrong room. That night, I lay awake listening to the house. The quiet hum of the refrigerator. The distant click of someone's door closing. Laughter drifting from Lucas's room, unbothered and loud. No one was losing sleep over this except me, and that told me exactly how alone I was in this conversation. The next morning, the first reminder appeared. A sheet of paper taped to the refrigerator. Neatly typed. Bullet points. Monthly contribution. Due date. Consequences for delay. My name was the only one on it. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I reached for my coffee and pretended I hadn't seen a thing. Evelyn watched from the counter, pretending not to watch me. We both understood the performance. Over the next week, the reminders multiplied. Have you thought about budgeting? She asked one afternoon, in front of guests. It's a good learning opportunity, she said another time, laughing lightly. You'll thank me later, she added, as if she were doing me a favor. Each comment landed gently, but together they pressed down like weight. And still I said nothing. Not because I was afraid, but because I was listening. Thomas never stepped in. Not once. Every time his mouth opened, it closed again without sound. Peace to him meant not choosing a side. He didn't realize that silence was a choice. The deadline came faster than I expected. 30 days, Evelyn said at dinner one evening. That should be more than enough time. I nodded. Plenty. Lucas snorted into his drink. Good luck with that, he muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. Evelyn shot him a look, not to scold him, but to remind him to let her handle it. She liked control, to look elegant. That night, I did something she never expected. I didn't look for another place to live. I didn't argue with my father. I didn't plead, negotiate, or explain. Instead, I went up to my room and pulled a small box from the back of my closet. Inside were old documents, papers I'd never needed before, things my grandparents had insisted I keep, just in case. At the time, I thought they were being overly cautious. As I spread them across my bed, my phone buzzed downstairs. I heard Evelyn's voice float up the staircase, light and confident. "She'll come around," she said to someone. "They always do." I picked up the first document and started reading. And that's when I realized something she didn't. She wasn't giving me 30 days. She was giving herself exactly that much time before everything changed. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was worried about rent, or deadlines, or Evelyn's carefully rehearsed smiles. I stayed awake because something about those papers felt heavier than I remembered. Like they had been waiting quietly for the right moment. And suddenly, that moment had arrived. The first document was old, slightly yellowed at the edges. My grandparents' names were printed at the top. I traced the letters with my finger, remembering how insistent they'd been when they handed me this box years ago. "Keep these somewhere safe," my grandmother had said. "You may not need them, but if you ever do, you'll be glad you listened." At the time, I'd smiled and nodded, not really understanding. Now, sitting on my bed with the house silent around me, I understood exactly what she'd meant. I read slowly, carefully, not skimming, not hoping, just absorbing. And with every line, my heartbeat steadied instead of racing. Because this wasn't complicated. The house wasn't just associated with me. It wasn't partially connected. It wasn't conditional. It was mine. Not in theory. Not emotionally. Legally. Completely. I sat there for a long time, the document resting in my lap, listening to the sound of Evelyn's laughter drifting faintly from downstairs. She sounded relaxed, confident, certain of how the story would end. I smiled to myself, not because I was amused, because certainty can be dangerous when it's built on assumptions. The next morning, Evelyn doubled down. She'd added a calendar to the fridge, a bright red circle around the due date, a handwritten note beneath it. "Let me know if you need help figuring this out." Help. The word felt almost generous, almost kind, almost convincing. Lucas noticed it too. "Wow," he said, pouring himself cereal. "Guess adulthood's coming for you fast." Mia glanced at the calendar, then at me, then away again. She didn't say anything. She never did. Silence was her specialty. I poured my coffee and took a sip, deliberately unhurried. "Looks that way." Evelyn watched me over the rim of her mug, eyes sharp. She was waiting for cracks. For frustration. For fear. She didn't get either. That afternoon, I made a call. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't announce my plans. I simply left the house with my bag over my shoulder and drove across town, documents carefully tucked inside. The office was quiet. Neutral colors. Soft lighting. The kind of place designed to keep emotions out of the conversation. The attorney flipped through the paperwork with an expression that didn't change. Page after page. Stamp after stamp. When he finally looked up, his tone was professional, almost casual. "You have full authority," he said. "There are no shared controls, no conditions, no expiration." I nodded once, as if I'd expected that answer all along. "What about occupancy?" I asked. He paused, then smiled slightly. "That's entirely up to you." That sentence stayed with me all the way home. Entirely up to me. I could have ended it right there. Could have walked back into the house, laid everything out on the table, and watched Evelyn scramble for words she didn't have prepared. The temptation was real. But I didn't, because something else had become clear. She wasn't just pressuring me. She was building momentum. She was shaping a narrative where I looked irresponsible, ungrateful, difficult. If I interrupted it too early, she'd frame it as manipulation. So I let her keep going. The reminders continued, louder this time. "We should really finalize numbers," Evelyn said one evening. "You don't want to fall behind," she added another day. "Your father and I talked," she said once, casually, like it was nothing. That last one caught my attention. Later that night, I overheard their conversation from the hallway. Evelyn's voice was low, careful, sweet in the way she used when she wanted something. "She needs structure," she said. "This is good for her. You agree, don't you?" There was a pause. Thomas sighed. "I just don't want conflict." And that's why this works, Evelyn replied softly. I'll handle it. I stepped back quietly before they could notice me. Not because I was afraid, because I'd heard exactly what I needed. She believed she was in control. The deadline crept closer. Lucas started spending more time out of the house. Mia avoided me entirely. Even Thomas seemed tense, like he was bracing for an explosion he didn't understand. Then, 3 days before the due date, I did something unexpected. I posted a notice. Not on the fridge. Not in the kitchen. I slipped a simple envelope under each bedroom door. Inside was a single piece of paper. Household meeting. Attendance required. Sunday, 10 a.m. No explanation. No tone. Just information. The reaction was immediate. Evelyn cornered me in the hallway. What's this about? I'll explain then, I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. There's no need for drama. I smiled politely. I agree. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because by then, the outcome was already decided. They just didn't know it yet. Sunday morning arrived quietly. Too quietly. Everyone gathered in the living room. Evelyn sat upright, arms crossed, prepared to lead. Thomas looked uneasy. Lucas slouched. Mia stared at her phone. I sat across from them, a folder resting on my lap. Evelyn cleared her throat. Before we start, I'll start, I said, opening the folder. The sound of paper sliding against paper cut through the room. And as I placed the first document on the table, I watched something flicker across her face. Not anger. Not confusion. Recognition. The room felt smaller the moment the papers touched the table. Evelyn leaned forward, her confidence still intact, but no longer relaxed. Thomas adjusted his posture. Lucas stopped tapping his foot. Mia finally looked up from her phone. Everyone sensed a shift, even if they didn't yet understand why. This is unnecessary, Evelyn said lightly, reaching for the document. I slid it just out of reach. Let me explain first. Her smile tightened. Not gone. Just strained. Claire, we've already discussed expectations. Yes, I replied. That's exactly why we're here. I took a breath, slow and deliberate, letting the silence stretch just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Silence can be persuasive when used carefully. This house, I said evenly, was transferred to me years ago. Lucas laughed under his breath. You're still on that? I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on Evelyn. Not verbally, I continued. Not emotionally. Officially. Evelyn's hand froze mid-gesture. Thomas frowned. What do you mean officially? I opened the folder wider and placed the second document on top of the first. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each one heavier than the last. Not in weight, but in consequence. Ownership records, I said. Filed, notarized, and registered. The room went quiet in a way that felt different from before. This was an awkward silence. This was recalculation. Evelyn let out a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. This is a misunderstanding. No, I said calmly. It's clarification. Thomas leaned forward now, picking up one of the papers. His brow furrowed as he read. He flipped to the next page. Then the next. His face changed slowly, like the realization was arriving in pieces. Claire, he said carefully, why didn't you ever say anything? I met his gaze. No one asked. Evelyn stood abruptly. This proves nothing. Anyone can print documents. Which is why, I added, they're verified. I slid the final paper across the table. A confirmation seal. Dates. Signatures. Lucas stopped smiling. Mia's fingers tightened around her phone. Evelyn didn't sit back down. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Even if that's true, this is our home. We've lived here for years. And you still can, I said. Under the same conditions you expected from me. That landed. Evelyn stared at me, searching for hesitation. For weakness. For the version of me she was used to managing. She didn't find her. You wouldn't, she said quietly. You wouldn't do that to family. I tilted my head slightly. You were comfortable doing it to me. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Thomas exhaled sharply and stood. Enough. Both of us turned to him. He looked at Evelyn, then at me, his expression torn between habit and reality. We need time to talk about this. I agree, I said. Which is why nothing changes today. Evelyn's shoulders relaxed a fraction. But, I added, the rent request is withdrawn. Permanently. Her relief was instant. Too instant. And, I continued, we'll be revisiting household expectations. Lucas scoffed. Like what? I looked at him then. Really looked at him. Like contribution. Mia shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn's eyes narrowed again. You're enjoying this? No, I replied. I'm finishing it. That afternoon, the house felt different. Not loud. Not tense. Just unsettled. Like furniture had been moved while no one was looking. Evelyn avoided me entirely. Thomas tried to speak twice, then stopped himself both times. Lucas slammed a door. Mia stayed in her room. And I waited. Because leverage doesn't work unless it's applied at the right moment. 3 weeks passed. No rent was mentioned. No calendars. No notes on the fridge. But something else began to surface. Late payments. Missed utilities. Subtle panic masked as irritation. Evelyn started watching me the way people watch a storm forming offshore. Not afraid yet, but alert. One evening, she cornered me again. This isn't sustainable, she said tightly. We need clarity. You'll have it, I replied. Soon. Her jaw clenched. You're doing this on purpose. I smiled faintly. You taught me patience. That night, I made the final decision. I picked up my phone and typed a single message. Meeting tomorrow. 10 a.m. living room. I hovered over the send button for a moment, because once I pressed it, there would be no soft landings left. Then I sent it. The next morning, everyone arrived early. Evelyn sat rigid, hands folded. Thomas looked exhausted. Lucas paced. Mia stayed close to the door. I stood. I've reviewed everything, I said. Expenses. Usage. Responsibility. Evelyn interrupted. You can't just... I can, I said gently. And I am. I reached into my folder one last time, and as I pulled out the final document, Evelyn's face drained of color. Because she recognized this one immediately. Evelyn didn't need to read the document to know what it was. Her fingers hovered above the paper like touching it might make it real. She looked at Thomas first, then at Lucas, then at Mia, as if silently asking whether anyone else saw the same ending she did. This isn't necessary, she said, voice thinner than before. I placed the paper on the table anyway. It is. Thomas leaned in slowly. His eyes scanned the page. Once. Twice. Then he set it down, shoulders sagging. You've already spoken to someone, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. Weeks ago. Lucas stopped pacing. About what? About occupancy, I said. And expectations. Evelyn laughed suddenly. Too loudly. You can't turn this into a business arrangement. I didn't, I said. You did. I'm just finishing the paperwork. The document outlined it plainly. No raised voices. No threats. Just clarity. If they wished to stay, there would be clear terms. Shared expenses. Shared responsibilities. Defined timelines. If they didn't, there would be no argument. No delay. The house would move forward either way. Mia read silently, eyes widening slightly. Lucas shook his head in disbelief. Evelyn pressed her lips together, the practiced composure finally cracking. You planned this, she said, not accusing, realizing. I nodded once. I listened first. The room fell into a long, heavy quiet. Thomas cleared his throat. This is fair. Evelyn turned to him sharply. You're taking her side? I'm accepting reality, he said, not meeting her eyes. Something in Evelyn's posture collapsed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. She gathered the papers with stiff movements. I need time. You have a month, I said. That's more than I was given. Lucas muttered something under his breath and left the room. Mia followed, slower, glancing back once before disappearing upstairs. Evelyn stayed seated. You know, she said softly, I never thought you'd stand up like this. I smiled faintly. Neither did I. That night, the house was quieter than ever. No arguing. No pacing. Just doors closing carefully, as if everyone was suddenly aware of the walls. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Evelyn stopped giving instructions and started asking questions. Lucas picked up extra hours. Mia learned to cook something other than instant meals. Thomas spoke less, but listened more. And I noticed something unexpected. The tension faded, not because anyone was happy, but because uncertainty had been replaced with truth. At the end of the month, the envelopes appeared on the table. Signed. Neat. Final. No dramatics. No scenes. Just acceptance. That evening, I sat alone in the living room, lights low, the house breathing around me in a way it never had before. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't angry. I was calm. And for the first time, the space felt like it belonged to me, not just on paper, but in presence. Some people think strength looks loud, like confrontation, like raised voices and sharp endings. But sometimes, strength looks like patience, like waiting, like knowing exactly when to speak and when to stop. If you've ever been underestimated, you already know how powerful quiet certainty can be. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? And where are you watching from right now? Because this wasn't just a story about a house. It was about choosing not to disappear anymore.